Hi, everyone. I'm Angela,
Hi, everyone. I'm Savan.
and welcome to our Peace and Justice series as a part of Acropolis, Boston. So today, I'm so excited to talk about a man who's actually partially responsible and the inspiration for this series, Bryan Stevenson. So we created this series to offer a philosophical perspective of how we can change our world for the better by changing ourselves. And we're talking about how to cultivate more peace and justice in our world, pulling from timeless wisdom and modern thinkers. And Bryan Stevenson is an American lawyer, a social justice activist. He's the founder of the Equal Justice Initiative. And he does a number of different things to really sort of bring this vision forward. He works to release those wrongfully convicted of crimes. He started really an international narrative about justice and equality. And today we're going to discuss just some of his ideas for creating sustainable change and creating a healthier society. And again, this is just one video actually in a multi-part series. We'll actually probably be doing a few more on Bryan Stevenson. And there is so much to talk about here. To start us off, I wanted to ask you, we've been discussing things that can create change in our society. And Bryan Stevenson offers up four sort of main areas or ways we can do that. But one of which we wanted to focus on today was about this concept called proximity and getting proximate. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Bryan Stevenson, as you know, is really keen on the equality of all human beings and promoting justice amongst all human beings as well. So, he has that Equal Justice Initiative. And when he talks about proximity, he says in many videos, I've watched him say this, that we have to get close to people who are suffering, marginalized, and excluded. And I was reflecting on this and thought, wow, that is a mission that requires us to first look within ourselves, right? Because when we have to think about what does that mean, getting close to people who are marginalized and suffering, we have to come to grips with our own suffering, our own fears of getting close to other people. And when we think about what is required to get close to people, the word that comes to mind, Angela, is courage, the virtue of courage. Because people are very different. They have different ideas, different dreams, and sometimes we may fear getting close to people who we do not know. But as philosophers say, the unexamined life is not worth living. We have to get close to ourselves. Who are we? If I want to get close to others, I need to first get close to myself to understand the human condition. So that's one of the virtues that comes to mind when I think about getting close, because there's obviously going to be some fear, some doubt, some hesitation, apprehension of the unknown, because we are often fearful of what we do not understand. That includes other people. So that's something that really resonates with me, with the idea of proximity, of yes, we got to get close to other people and see how they're living, what their needs are, because they are our brothers and sisters on this planet. But we also need to get close to ourselves and realize I need to know myself. And another philosophical quote, know thyself, because Socrates, as we noted, said the unexamined life is not worth living.
The word that also comes to mind too when you mentioned courage when it comes to getting proximate, the word that comes to mind for me is vulnerability. That it's a courageous act to get close to oneself in this effort, because it requires us to be vulnerable with ourselves. And there's a definition that Brene Brown offers, we talked about in another video, about what vulnerability is. Vulnerability is uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. But vulnerability is not weakness. It's our most accurate measure of courage. When the barrier is our belief about vulnerability, the question becomes, Are we willing to show up and be seen when we can't control the outcome?
I love that.
Yeah.
That idea about not controlling the outcome. We get so attached to the outcomes of the many endeavors we engage in life. But where the true treasure lies is in the journey. Just as we were saying, the journey to become more knowledgeable about oneself, being in this world and engaging other human beings. That's why I think Bryan Stevenson is really, really honing in on this idea of becoming proximate with other people, other human beings. And the classical tradition, I'm speaking of philosophy, speaks about knowing thyself and becoming proximate with who we are, who we want to be. And this is scary, very scary. But when we have the fear and doubt, then we could embody courage. When we get anxious or temperamental, we can practice temperance. So life gives us so many opportunities to practice being proximate with others and ourselves. And in doing so, in the journey of becoming proximate with others in the world, we can practice embodying these virtues, living a life of courage and seeing the injustice in the world and recognizing what justice is. And I'll say, Angela, that we will become agents of change, agents of internal change, because the inner world that we have within us, all human beings have this, can be a reflection, can be reflected outward. So the more courage, the more justice, the more wisdom, the more temperance I can cultivate within, I can make that a reality in the outside world.
Yeah, and so I wanted to hit on that point about, getting proximate with yourself isn't just, sort of a narcissistic kind of venture there, but that it's realizing that the only thing that we can control in this world is ourselves, our own attitudes and ways that we see the world. When we can get close to that and sort of really get to the heart of, where are there areas in my own life where I'm not peaceful, or where I, maybe don't and act the most justly towards my fellow human being, that those are the efforts that can help us create this ripple effect that will begin to change the world. And we know that this is possible because we look at just Bryan Stevenson himself. He's one person who has created this movement in the United States, but also internationally, just through his own journey of getting close to himself and close to the people he's trying to help.
When I was thinking about this topic, and you touched upon this, the sense that we have as human beings, that we're different, right? We are all created equal, as our founding documents say, we the people, not I the me, us and them. It's we the people. And when we do not become closer to one another, what happens is we construct bubbles, little enclaves, start to exclude others based on arbitrary differences. In the history of our country, it's skin color, no gender. It's absurd. What if it was handedness? Right? We would say that's ridiculous. Why would we treat someone different because they're left-handed or right-handed? Whether they like the color green or orange, whether they have a laptop that's made by one company, not by another. That's the problem when we see the otherness, not just in people, but in things. When we forget that we are all children of this universe, that we are all created equally, not just human beings, but the objects created out of atoms, stardust. And a consequence of this, of the separateness, the otherness, is one, we aren't proximate. We don't get to know one another. We forget that we all share dreams, better lives for our children, better lives for ourselves. And that breeds hopelessness, that things can't change. They've been that way forever. It'll stay that way forever. But we know that in history, there has been changes by human agents to make the world a better place. Saw this in the previous century, the civil rights movement and women's suffrage movement, just to name a few. And Bryan Stevenson says, hopelessness is the enemy of justice. Injustice prevails where hopelessness persists. So to become more proximate with each other and ourselves is going to require love, but also the utilization of these morals, to live a moral life, not a life of material. Because that doesn't make us get close to one another. It makes us get closer to things, which doesn't bring happiness. We know that. So, yeah, they're tied together. These virtues that we've been talking about, the courage to look within, to look without, to look people in the eye and say, how was your day? How are you? Are you suffering? I know what suffering's like. Who doesn't know? You know, when we look on the world and we see the suffering and pain and the hate, the shame, the trauma, it can make us feel disillusioned. And this goes to what we were saying about hope. And people may get the, as we know, false idea that they cannot do anything to change that circumstance. But we all can contribute our own little patch of earth here, whether it's trying to understand who we are, where we're going, where we come from, right? That's the internal journey, or even external, volunteering at a soup kitchen, at a elderly home care home, just spending time with the elderly. We shouldn't discount the good we can do in the world. This made me think of not just the proximate, becoming proximate with who we are and others, but proximate to the truth. Truth. And the truth is that justice will prevail. Love will prevail. Martin Luther King would say, he uses this phrase often, in the final analysis, right? That when we align ourselves with what's good in the world, good in ourselves, what's beautiful and just, with our topic today on justice, we cannot lose. That creates harmony in the individual and society. And it could break these cycles of trauma and shame that we transmit to the next generation. When we not want to look at problems, turn our eye, a blind eye. I can't change that. Out of sight, out of mind. That doesn't help anyone. But when we engage the problems, difficult as they are, we extract the best within ourselves to find, as you said, Angela, solutions to the problems. And this is why we need peace, internal peace, so we can create an external justice in the world, so we can become whole, not just within, but without, out in the world. Because we are stronger united than we are divided. And it's not just to have an intellectual life. So many people like to quote philosophers and talk about the books they've read. Not saying that's a bad thing. But to create peace and justice in the world, we have to live what those philosophers were teaching. We have to embody the virtues that they were talking about, live the values of which they spoke. I think that's the connection we need to make with truth.
And I will leave us on that note of hope for the future, but also hope for our next video, where we will start to unpack a little bit more about how we can get proximate to Bryan Stevenson's ideas there, and then also to some timeless teachings that can help us out along the way. But before we do that, any closing thoughts here, what you want to leave people with before we get into our next video?
Yes, just one note, that we have the ability to transform our lives. We have to remember that, because so often we think that there's nothing we can do. This goes back to the word hope. Hope is very essential to Bryan Stevenson's message. Every day when I engage the world, I can think, wow, I don't know how long this beautiful moment, life itself, will last. I have limited time and energy. What will I use it for? Will I stay on this horizontal plane, right? The world of materialism, things, or will I try to elevate myself to this truth that I am not just here to take part in mundane activities that doesn't serve anyone, particularly me? Or will I look at Bryan Stevenson's example of what it means to promote equality and justice in the world, to love life, to engage it, not for selfish reasons, but for selflessness, giving myself, or as Abraham Lincoln would say, put my whole soul into it to embody truth and justice and transform myself and the world around me, and to give back wisdom and love. So I wanted to make that note, because that's how we can create a harmonious coexistence with one another.
Amazing. Well, Simon, thank you so much again for
Thank you.
Having this conversation and us just embarking on this journey together. So I hope everyone watching will tune in for our next video. And thank you again. And cheers to that, to transformation.